Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Bankroll Burners, the poker podcast for players who can't stop getting it in bad. I'm Mike,
And I'm Josh.
and as always, we are going to be bringing you some poker hands that we played recently. We're going to be discussing them with each other, talking about how we could have played them better, walking through them street by street. You know how it's going at this point. Um, and
Yeah.
we're also going to be doing something a little new. Josh, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, we're going to try a new segment today called Fumbling Fundamentals, where we let you in on some of our theory discussions that we often have offline and are hoping to bring to the podcast. Today we'll be discussing bomb pots and when to get value. So stay tuned, and once we finish our hands, we'll be moving into that new segment.
Absolutely. And one thing I'm really excited about for this segment is, we're going to talk about these topics, and have really kind of interesting in-depth discussions where we feel like we're sort of getting a handle on it, really getting in the weeds. And then someone can just let us know in the comments immediately how dumb everything we're saying is. So that's what I'm most excited about.
Yeah, that should be good. This is why we named the segment, because we're sure that we actually don't have a great grasp on fundamentals. So anyone who wants to chime in with opinions, please don't hesitate to type us a comment.
Exactly. All right. Well, cool. So I think let's get into our hands here. I think you're going to take point on this one, Josh. So go ahead.
I am. So I'm back at Encore for this one. I was able to fit in one session last week. This is Encore Boston Harbor. This is the 1-3 game, $500 cap. Again, it's a deep game. It plays big. It's a really fun game. In this particular hand, I was playing at a table, actually in a pretty good position. I was a couple seats to the left of a couple guys who were playing quite aggressively, quite pretty crazy. One of them was definitely getting close to being a certified maniac. I mean, I really think he had close to 100% VPIP. He was just like shoving all the time, like just check shoving,
Oh,
and everyone kept folding because like he was shoving for a lot.
oh my God, that's awesome. By the way, for those of you who aren't familiar with VPIP, that is voluntarily put chips in pot. So someone with 100% VPIP is playing all of the hands, which is exactly what we love to see from someone from our right.
Of course, he stacked me as he managed to hit a set. But that is the benefit
Uh,
of playing like a maniac and playing all your hands, is that when you do hit, and someone is like, "Well, I've had enough of this guy," then you're gonna get paid. So, I'm very happy to have him
Absolutely.
at the table. I will certainly be looking for him in future games.
Yeah, the lesson here for everyone in the audience is if someone's really pushing you around and you're getting sick of their shit, do not under any circumstances try to play back at them because they absolutely will have the nuts.
Yes, you just say that because you want to play like a maniac and you don't want our listeners to look you up.
Yeah. No, if you're playing against me, you should always call. That's probably true. Um, no, okay. So you're playing at a table. You're playing at a great table, sounds like.
Yeah, exactly. So in this particular hand, the main maniac, isn't going to be part of the hand, but there is another guy who I'll talk a little bit about after the hand, just because at this point I have basically just sat down. This is one of the first hands that I play. Again, kind of looking at the action, like it's basically just gotten around to me under the gun, and a couple people have been putting the straddle on. Seems like there's good action and it's encouraging it. So of course I'm happy to put the straddle on as well. As we do at those. So we're playing 1-3-6. We're going to be about 500 effective, as that's what I bought in for, and both other players in this hand are going to have me plenty covered.
What's the standard open over a straddle in this game?
It really varies, and I will get to that, but I would say ordinarily the standard open without a straddle is 15 over a 1-3 game, and so the standard open over a straddle is usually only 20. I mean, it's less proportionally, but it is higher than the 15 over the
Sure.
three. So usually around 20, I'd say.
Yeah, and that's pretty common from what I've noticed. I mean, like in the 2-2 game in Jacksonville, the standard opens 10, and then if there's a straddle on, it's 15. So it's not like it really doubles the standard open size. So, okay. All right. So,
Definitely something that, right, as you go up in stakes, the open kind of becomes closer towards like 3x, 2.5x, like you might expect it to be, in theory. But in this 1-3 deep game, people just, if you race to 10, you're going to get 6 callers. So,
yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Okay.
so I'm in the straddle. And it is going to fold all the way around to the small blind. Another one of these hands. I think I had one of these last week, but it's just the ones that I keep playing and getting in trouble in. So clearly, I need to keep talking about them.
Yeah, blind versus blind is so hard to play as like a cash game player because a lot like it's something you don't often get to do because if there's no straddle on, then you're probably just chopping the blinds, and then if there is a straddle on, it just doesn't happen that often. So
Yeah.
hard hands to play.
So what's going to happen here is the small blind, who's going to be the main villain in this hand, he limps for 6. The big blind now does something very strange. He raises it up to 15. So this is why, you ask the standard straddle open, and I'm saying, usually it's 20, but this guy raises to 15 over a limp. And now I'm sitting in the straddle with 8-5 of diamonds. And, I'm basically thinking, like, I just feel like I can't possibly fold, like, basically any suited hands to this, like, sizing.
Agreed. You do have to call with the 8-5 of diamonds, although that is not a great hand. I will say that, a lot of times when someone makes a small open over a limp, it is not a very strong hand. It is certainly not a premium hand. At the very least, it can't really be aces or kings, or probably queens or jacks.
Yeah,
so that's kind of nice.
Yeah, I mean, do you think there's any merit to 3-betting here? Like, I just felt like that was just way too loose. I mean, I'm in position on these two, so it's not like, it's not like I have to 3-bet, and I'm getting such a good price, and I can reasonably expect the small blind to come along a lot of the time too, and I'm going to be in position on both of them, which is rare for being in the straddle.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and say that 3-betting with 8-5 suited under any circumstance is what we might call a spew. So,
well, maybe I need to incorporate a little spew. Anyway, I call. The small blind calls, so kind of everything going as expected. Again, just kind of a couple things to think about that small raise size. Small blind has limps, I've just called. So small blind double flatted, I should say, limp called.
Sure.
And at this point, there's 45 in the pot. We've got piles behind. And the flop is going to come 8-4-3 rainbow with the 3 of diamonds. So we've got top pair. We've got a pretty bad kicker, but that kicker does lead to a backdoor straight draw, and we do have a backdoor flush draw as well.
Okay. 8-4-3, the 3 of diamonds. You have 8-5 of diamonds. You are in position to 2 villains. Pot's 45. What does the small blind do?
So this is where the hand starts getting interesting. The small blind leads for 45.
Wow. Okay, so small blind pots it.
Correct.
And
again, I've just sat down at this table, so I don't know necessarily if this guy is doing this a lot, if he's donking a lot, if he's how he's playing, if he's like super tight, and this is just indicative that he just like has an extremely strong hand here, or what. Again, I'll talk a little bit more about his tendencies at the end, but I don't want to spoil anything or give anything away at this point.
Okay, fair enough. So I mean, nutted hands he can have here 3-3, 4-4. He probably doesn't have 8-8. I think most people are going to raise that out of the small blind. So, and you're also blocking the crap out of that. So 3-3, 4-4 would be the nutted hands. He can't really have a combo draw given that it's a rainbow board. I guess he could have like 5-6 for an open ender, 6-7 for a gutter. He could also have a weird suited 2-pair type hand, like I guess 4-3. I don't know. Pretty weird. Probably a gut shot would be my inclination, like a pair plus gut, or no pair plus gutter, but like a second pair or like a gut shot. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it could be something like kind of what I have, right? Like a pair and a good backdoor. Like maybe he's got 8-5 of clubs. Maybe he's got 5-4 of hearts, something like that. It's kind of a pair and some sort of stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
So the big blind folds, and I think I have a square call here. I mean, it is a big bet, and I know when you're thinking about donks, there is a school of thought that kind of says there's two kinds of donks, where the smaller ones, as we've kind of waxed poetic about, are often top pair weak kicker or weak draw sort of hands, and bigger ones can sometimes be indicative of more nutted hands. But I would say a lot of those nutted hands tend to be ones that unblock the board. Like if you flop a straight or something like that, where people, it's one of these things where again, even people who don't understand theory actually kind of intuit the theory that if I have a straight, people can have all sorts of sets, 2 pairs, and whatever, right? Which is like kind of how the theory goes, and people kind of intuit that, I think, a lot.
Sure, although of course there's not a straight possible on this board. I mean, I don't
Right.
even know that he would take a set this way. I mean, this is just really bizarre. Like, you have to call one street. I mean, I might get
Yeah.
cautious if the turn is something crazy, but yeah, you can't fold this.
I agree, and I think my top pair, I just have to make the call, so I do. And we've got 135 in the pot at this point. We've got 440 behind, and the turn is going to come the ace of spades, which completes the rainbow.
Hmm. Okay. Well, that's something that shouldn't interact with either of your hands at all, as
Right.
as
One
played.
one would think, right? And now it is possible if we're thinking about bluffs that he can have, like gut shots. There is some hands that we could think about are like ace five, ace deuce. Those are hands that were gutters on the flop and now have run into a top pair.
Sure, and that's actually a really good point. And he might even have offsuit combos of all those hands. So it actually could comprise a sizable portion of his range if he plays like gutters this way, which I think we're assuming he does, given how weird this line is. He must have some gutters in there. So yeah, actually, you're right. This actually could interact with this hand. Okay.
But what he's going to do is it continues getting weird. He bets not the same bet, but actually a down bet. He bets 40 now. And
Wow.
here's where I kind of look at this hand and I think I made a mistake. This is a spot where I feel like when he bets so small, he's kind of indicating that he's like scared of this ace. Maybe he does have like a pair below the eight. Like maybe that's the sort of hand that he donked with, like fives, sixes, or maybe I mean I
Like
don't
a
know.
yeah, like a spaz with a low pair. Yeah, people do that all the time. Sure. At,
Or
at this level.
Or maybe he's got something like a better eight, like an 8-6, 8-7, 8-9, 10-8, something like that. And now he's kind of really down betting because he wants to, keep betting, but he's worried about that ace and thinks now, he could be beat, whereas before he was more confident.
Yeah, I think that I will say, I guess, a couple things here. One, I don't ever think he has an eight, to be honest with you. Like, I've
Okay.
never seen somebody donk pot with top pair. I don't think I've ever seen it. It's just that'd be really
That's a good
weird.
point.
I
Hmm.
and I mean, I played a good amount of poker, and I've never seen someone do that. So I don't really think he ever has an eight. I mean, he could have two pair. He could have an 8-4 or 8-3, um, but I don't think he just has a naked eight or like ace eight. So yeah, I mean, this is certainly feels like a see where I'm at bet type of thing. And so I could even see like 9-9 if he's limping that. I mean, we don't know what type of player this is. Maybe he's limping 9-9. So this could be 9-9. Um, could be 7-6s, fives, like you said. Uh,
Yeah, because the interesting thing here, right, is I'm almost thinking, to this bet, am I supposed to raise and take advantage of the weakness? But now, as you're kind of describing these hands, like really, he shouldn't have 9-9 or better. So any sort of raise, is really only it's just not working, right? It's just doing the opposite of what it should, which is it's folding out all the hands worse, and it's getting called or shut, three bet by any hand that's like better, like a flop two pair or a set that he just decided to take this tiny sizing for some reason.
yeah, it's pretty weird. I mean, I feel like he doesn't have a set here. Like, I don't think he's taking this sizing with a set. Because what I was gonna say is I have seen players do this weird down bet thing with sort of like when they like make the nuts, they'll like down bet to somehow disguise their hand. I've definitely seen that weird sort of thing um, from certain player types, but I don't even know what hand like makes the nuts like
Right, like
here.
it would have to be 2-5, which just
Right, like
seems loose
literal
even
two
for
five.
yeah. And
Yeah, so
I have a 5, so there's only 3 combos of that, and it's probably not a hand that most people are limping.
yeah, even from the small blind. So
You're right.
yeah, I kind of think this is like I think this is just a call and evaluate river. I think he probably has like 7-7 here, honestly, like a lot. So
Yeah. So I do call. I was kind of thinking as I was describing the hand and as I was thinking about it after that, maybe I should have raised there as a bluff, but I actually don't think that makes sense just because, you know, he really shouldn't have any hands better than mine that are actually going to fold, right?
yeah, no, nothing, absolutely nothing. I mean,
Yeah.
if he's really bad, he might fold 9-9, but again, you shouldn't really have that hand much anyway. So
Yeah. So the river is now going to come a 9.
okay, which
And
completes no draws,
it
which I think
completes
is important.
absolutely no draws.
Okay, yeah,
And he now bets 75 into 215. So it's about a third pot. We've got, tons left behind. He bets 75 into 215. And this is again a spot. I mean, it's another, tiny bet in relation to the size of the pot. And again, I kind of just think, given the his hand, given how he's played this hand with the donk, the giant down bet, I kind of lean towards a call here thinking about it in retrospect, but interested to hear your thoughts there.
Yeah, I mean, you're getting 4-1, so right, you have to call 75 to win 280. So it's a little less than 4-1, but you're basically getting 4-1, which means you have to be good here 1 out of 5 times, 20% of the time. I mean, I I don't know. Like, I don't really feel like we're good once he bets the river here. It doesn't really make sense to me that he would bet the river with anything worse than what we have. Like, I I don't know. It's very weird. I mean, the whole hand is so weird. I might call just because I'm curious. Like, are we good here 20% of the time? Like, I don't really know. I really don't know. Like, I'm totally lost. Like, this is one of those hands where I don't really think it matters what you do because, like, you will almost never be in situations like this again. And so, if we think about it from
Sure.
like a long term standpoint, it just doesn't matter. So, I might just call like I was just out of pure curiosity, or I might fold out of self-preservation and not care and just be like, whatever, I'll figure this player out later. Clearly, he's a wackadoodle. He's going to do some more dumb shit. So,
Yeah,
I,
and I was kind of thinking, and I think that's totally fair. And I was kind of thinking, like, wow, like, what value hands does he have that are doing this? Is the thing. Like, you say, what does he have that I beat? And I'd say, well, I mean, what about all those missed draws, right? Is he taking like 6-7 like this? And he's just like taking this super weird sizing because, players leveled themselves into being like, well, if I bet small, it'll look like I'm doing a milky value bet. So I'm going to bet small. Yeah, when really like that just prices me into call with like everything. Like, do you think there's any way I agree with you that he shouldn't really be doing this with worse value, right?
yeah,
Like, shouldn't that, like any sort of sixes, sevens, fives should definitely just be like
checking.
checking back here, right? Or
But
checking to me.
I guess what I'm thinking though is like because of the see where I'm at bet on the turn, and I'm almost certain that's what that was. I don't think he ever has a bluff. I think he has a marginal made hand on the turn. I think he might even have literal 8-9 right now. I think that is entirely possible. So, um, yeah. I mean, although I did say I don't really think he has a naked 8 based on his flop bets, so maybe I'm contradicting myself. I really don't know what he has. Like that's why I'm just like, what the heck? I mean,
Yeah, and
I
that's
think
why I thought.
I'd
Go
call
ahead.
because I would call out of curiosity. I would.
Yeah, and I think you make a good point that we don't talk about much. That is, it's in situations like these that are like it's blind versus blind. There's a donk. There's a down bet. It's just such non-traditional play. As you say, you're not going to face it enough that like theoretically you need to know what to do, but it's good to get like the understanding of your opponent one way or another, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
because you want to know what they're doing with this. So that's kind of what I was thinking is like, okay, what is he limp calling with out of the small blind, donking pot on the flop, betting tiny on the turn and then making another bet on the river. And so I do wind up calling, and I think you're kind of spot on here that it was sort of a see where I'm at bet on the turn as he flips over 9-9.
Ha! Got him.
Which you did kind of call. I mean, and I think it's just one of these things where I'm like, wow, like, in retrospect, like it doesn't make sense, right? Because like 9-9 just shouldn't play any like 9-9 shouldn't play the flop and the pre-flop like that.
Right.
But as played, it kind of makes sense because it's
Hmm.
like, well, if you had an overpair on the flop, you're scared of the turn and you make a small bet, and then suddenly you just make like the effective nuts on the river and you want to keep betting. Although why he took that sizing is beyond me.
Well, he got. I mean, if he'd gone larger, would you have called?
I don't know. I think it just. I guess I might. I just think it was such a weird hand. Like I might still have called out of curiosity. Like if he had gone 100, I feel like I probably would have called. I mean, if he had gone 200 or shoved or something, probably not.
Oh yeah. I mean, if he shoves there, it's a super easy fold, of course. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, what a weird hand. But I mean, that's just the sort of thing you see at this level, and it's like you gotta ultimately players doing weird things like that is how you make money. So is that
And,
how you
and
make
I
money in
did
one three game?
feel. I will say I did feel a little bit better about it, sort of in the long term, as I watched him play. He was sitting next to the other maniac, and they were like buddies, and he was definitely also like playing very strange. He was raising a good amount pre-flop, so I don't know what he was doing with in this hand with 9-9. And then he was just donking all the time with just like random hands, like exactly those sort of hands, like pair plus straight draw, like pair plus, just pair, like just doing donks with like all sorts of crap. And like he did continue for multiple streets on some occasions. So it made me feel better about my call. But it's just kind of one of these things where, again, it almost is like if he's going to keep doing this, then I don't need to call because eventually we'll see anyway if he keeps doing this.
Yeah, so. Right. Which is sort of like, the other side of the coin. So I don't really think it, like, ultimately, again, like, this is how you deal with weird situations like this is not what makes a winning player at 1-3 or even really at any level for that matter. So I think it's just sort of like, like chalk it up to a strange hand and,
Yeah, I just thought it was a fun one to discuss and think about some of the weirdness of, the 1-3 streets.
Oh, absolutely. And it's like, it's good to kind of get in the heads of these players because you will encounter people doing things like weird donk bets and all that kind of stuff. So, and down
right.
bet.
Yeah.
All right.
Donk bet, down bet is even worse than donk bet, same bet.
Oh, donk bet, down bet. Man, I don't see that a lot. I'll be honest with you.
No, me neither. Well, anyway, just an interesting hand, and happy to move on to yours. Were you back in Jacksonville, or is this another hand from Philly?
No, this was all right. So we're back in Jacksonville here, and my buddy was visiting me in town, and he doesn't play much poker. So we wanted to go together. We wanted to sit at the same table together, have some drinks, have a few laughs. Not really there to grind so much as to joke around and have fun. So
I'm always there to grind.
Of course you are.
And that's why I made that call with 8-5. Anyway, carry on.
Exactly. So, we sit down at a 2-2 game and just to have a bit of fun. And of course, it turns out to be the worst 2-2 game of all time. So this game was so nitty. Nobody was deep. I attempted to set up river shoves. And mind you, this game has a $200 cap. So setting up a river shove is not very hard. But I tried to set up so many river shoves in these games, and everyone would just fold to my turn bet, whether it was for bluff or value. Like any bet over like $35, you simply could not get called for the life of you.
Was it nitty pre-flop also, or was it sort of like people were just kind of okay? Yes, I was gonna say, or were people just limping in on pre-flop, but then folding to any slightest aggression on the flop?
Yeah, so it was like, people were limping a lot pre-flop. Almost nobody raised pre-flop ever. I was not able to get a single 3-bet in the whole night because it simply like there just weren't enough pre-flop raises.
Wow.
Yeah, and this gentleman who I've played with many times, who is the worst person ever for a game, he buys in for $30 and sits and plays almost no hands until he gets stacked, and then buys in for another $30. So he was there, and nobody would straddle. At one point, I was even doing blind double straddles because they don't allow real double straddles.
Right.
So I was like talking to the guy to the right of me. I was like, if you straddle, I'll blind 10. So that I was like trying to do just about anything to drive the action, and nothing was going. So worst table of all time. Anyway, but what are you going to do? I mean, I didn't want to mess with a table change because, like I said, I was there with my buddy. We didn't want to, it's a headache. So, but we still got an interesting hand out of this. So
excellent. Well, let me just preface by saying, if someone raises you, fold. Anyway.
Yeah, good point.
Go ahead.
So we are playing, and early on in the night, there was one particular player at the table who I was very glad he was there. Not because he was like spewy, but because he was just really bad. Like he was raising and betting in spots that made no sense. He was making weird calls, weird folds. Like nothing he was doing made any kind of sense. And that was fine by me. I was trying very hard to play pots with him, and it was going pretty well. Eventually, he did get up and leave, but he was there for like an hour. So that is the villain in this hand. And I'm in the big blind in this hand. There is no straddle on. I have ace of spades, 5 of spades, and we are $200 effective with the main villain.
Okay.
Sound good?
Yeah, it does.
Alrighty. So it it folds to the low jack, who limps. And then pretty good. And then the hijack, who is our friend, our dear friend, Not my buddy, but the guy who we were trying to play pots with.
Thank you.
Yeah. He makes it $20, which is large. I mean, that's a big raise, but like I said, he'd been doing stuff that made literally no sense all night. So there's nothing to read into that raise.
And has he been raising occasionally pre-flop,
Yes.
and then you just see his hand later, and it's like 9-7 offsuit or
Yes.
something? For
Exactly.
example.
Exactly. It wasn't literal 9-7 offsuit, but I think Jack-7 offsuit. So
Yes, that's just a premium.
yeah, exactly. So this guy is he's just clicking buttons. So he makes it 20. Button calls, and then it folds to me in the big blind. And I have ace of spades, five of spades. And I
Yep.
like to just call. And the limper calls as well, so we're four ways. So before we go to the flop action, I want to hear your thoughts on my call. I'll explain myself in a bit, but I want to hear your thoughts first.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. I think, if we call, the limper is almost certainly going to call because of how people think. We have this suited ace. We're pretty shallow, especially when the raise is so big. So, three betting, we'd have to make kind of a weird sizing. One thing I'm kind of interested in, like considering, would be making like a weirdly small three bet in the hopes of like isolating the hijack. Just because I think if we even if you bumped it up to like 50 here, like the limper is gonna fold, and there's like a decent chance that the button folds as well, and then we're heads up with the betting lead against the bad player. So that's kind of my only consideration, is to kind of make this weird, like a non-standard play, just to try and thin the field, because it seems like if he's just button clicking, the hijack may come along regardless.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. And I wish I had done that. I did not think of it in the moment. In the moment, my thought was, well, a standard three bet size here would be $100, which
It's too
is not
much.
something I really ever want to be doing with ace of spades, five of spades, with ace five suited at a $200 effective. Like, your suited wheel aces are really hands you want to play at least a 2 street game, if not a 3 street game with.
Yeah.
You want to be able to float and have a dynamic board, like take advantage of dynamic boards and all these different things and flop draws. But like, so you don't want to be playing, ace five suited at
No.
0.5 SPR. I mean, that's a joke. So that was why I didn't raise. But I actually really like your play from like an exploitative standpoint. Obviously, extremely unbalanced, but like when we're playing against this type of player, that's irrelevant. I really like that idea. I think I will incorporate that next time if I'm just trying to isolate a sort of bad button clicky type player, to just make a small isolating three bet. I really like that. So
Yeah, I mean, the real downside there is basically, if we made a small three bet, I think we'd assume that the low jack is going to fold. The
yeah,
hijack, is probably going to call, but the issue is the button might also call, just because it's not that much more. And then we're still facing the issue, just because it was such a big initial raise, of, if we made it 50 and two players called, we'd have a one SPR, which still doesn't, isn't great for a suited ace, as you've mentioned. So I don't
yeah.
hate the call either. It's just sort of an idea, especially if you were, maybe a little bit deeper, where, even if the button called, we might have, a little bit more play.
Well, that's a really good point as well. But I think in this specific situation, it really would have worked because the button was super tight. So I
Okay, so
think
he
it would
might
have
just
worked.
fold anyway.
Yeah. So yeah, I wish I'd done that, but we didn't do that. We just called. And we are $80 to a flop. And the flop is ace of diamonds, four of clubs, six of clubs. So we do not flop a flush draw or backdoor flush draw. We do flop a weak top pair and a four-way pot. And I guess we have a backdoor straight draw.
We sure do.
So I do not lead on this board. I do check.
Good.
And the low jack checks, and the hijack bets 20 once again. The button folds, and it's back on me. And I believe I have a square call here.
Yeah, I'm really happy to call, especially if this player's kind of clicking buttons. Like, players like this can definitely get scared to aggression, like post flop, if they're, So I like to just call and let him keep like firing away.
Sure. So I call, and the limper folds, the low jack folds. So it's heads up.
Would you ever consider leading this board if you had something like pocket sixes or pocket fours, or like a flush draw or something like that?
Multi-way, I don't think so. Even heads up, it's kind of weird because I'm not expecting like the original raise, especially heads up, I'm really not expecting the original raiser to check this board back, which is sort of the reason you would lead typically, is you
Right.
don't want it to check back. So I don't think so. I don't think this is a board I would really lead on.
Yeah, that's fair. I was just wondering. I know we've both been kind of talking about incorporating leading ranges and kind of trying to get that into our game, but I agree that this board, probably doesn't work that well for it most of the time. So we're heads up. There's a 120 in the pot at this point.
Yep. And I will say I want to talk a bit more about this player's tendencies, because I'd really been watching him, and I'd really had the privilege of watching him play a lot of hands because he was playing so many hands. And what I had seen from him was he tended to bet kind of second pair or top pair pretty liberally. Like basically if he had second pair or top pair, he was betting 3 streets. That's what I
Okay.
kind of observed from him. Like really, like that was his tendency. So in my head, I'm thinking, I think he has an ace. Like that's sort of another reason I didn't want to raise. I was like, he probably has an ace because I don't think he has a 6, because he raised
Sure.
pre-flop. That sort of like was what was sort of going on in my head. I was like, I don't know that I'm in the best spot here. I mean, does that kind of make sense?
When you say, I mean, my question would be, when you say second pair, could that be like kings through tens also? Like, do you think he'd be barreling 3 streets with that kind of second pair?
I hadn't seen him do it, but I do think it's possible. Yes.
But yeah, I mean, I don't think this board is a raise. I mean, I think our hand functions great as a call.
Oh yeah. Well,
Oh,
this is
yeah.
more about the turn. So the turn is the 3 of diamonds. So,
Okay.
no, the flush draw doesn't get there. We turn open-ended here.
Yep.
And we still have top pair. And I check to him, which I think I would pretty much always do. And he makes it
Yep.
40. He bets again. And this is, to me, I was sitting here thinking, like, I don't think I'm good. Because of how this player has been playing, I do not think I'm good. Because I don't really think he has a lot of 6s, so I think his hand is mostly just like random ace X. Does that? I don't know. I don't know if that's really sound logic, but that's what I was thinking in game. Do you see that, or do you think that that's just like leveling myself?
I think it's leveling yourself a little bit. Like, I do think that, I mean, I think there are some hands, especially if he's kind of button clicky, I don't know, especially when he's laying us such a good price. I mean, are you good here 1 in 5 times that he's like, just taking like 7-8 or some random 2 cards that he's just decided to bet? Like, is he ever doing something like that? Or is it, in your kind of observation, is it literally always, top or second pair?
That I've seen, he's basically always had top or second pair. I guess I've seen him make some pretty speculative calls with like terrible gut shots, but I don't think I've seen him bet them.
The
So
other thing, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
no, go ahead.
I was just going to say the other thing here is when we have ace 5, right? When we have a top pair plus an open ender, we basically have 11 outs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Assuming he's got just like an ace, let's say ace Broadway or something like that, a better
Sure.
ace than us that's not 2 pair. And that's actually like we are literally priced in by direct odds to make this call.
That's a really good point. And I wasn't considering folding here, but what I was considering was jamming as a bluff.
Okay, well, I mean, I don't necessarily. I mean, if you kind of think he has top pair, this to me doesn't seem like the kind of player who's going to be doing a whole lot of folding top pairs. If he's calling with like terrible gut shots, he probably wants to call with aces. Especially, I mean, I don't know how much attention he's necessarily paying, but like, this is a very wet board at this point, right? There's like a ton of draws. There's 2 flush draws. Like, there's the 5, a deuce, a 7, all kinds of just draws.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I don't know if he's necessarily paying attention, but even if he's not, from what you've told me, it doesn't seem like he's going to be too keen to be laying down any sort of top pair holdings just based on his player type.
Yeah, you're probably right, but I jammed as a bluff, so.
Oh, okay. And I mean, I don't know. I think your hand does have enough showdown value, like given that we're literally getting the direct odds to call even against an ace.
Yeah.
Like, and then the river can easily go check and we win, right?
Yes. I honestly think, like, I don't know. It's probably a spew, to be honest with you. Like, why do that? Because we have we can just call and win a lot. But for some reason, I really thought I was not good, and I jammed. And you know what? He tanked for a long time, and he folded.
So
So
what you're telling me is to put it in terms that the average poker player will understand is you put him on ace king and then you jammed with a worse hand anyway.
exactly, I put him on ace king. No, I don't know. For some reason, I was like really thinking I wasn't good. I decided to turn top pair weak kicker into a bluff. Um, but I think that is really, bad, probably just bad play on my part, and it worked out for me. But you know, I just wanted
I mean,
to.
did you find out what he had?
No, no, he looked really upset. Like he really looked upset while he was tanking, and he actually showed the dealer his hand before folding. And not that necessarily means anything, but I I don't know, like what he would do, like what he's so upset with. Possibly ace king, and he just like that he did decide like wasn't good. Maybe kings
I
too.
think I would be more inclined to think it's like kings, queens, jacks, because I've seen a lot of players kind of do that whole charade where they're basically moaning about how, oh, every time I have kings, the flop has an ace, and then this
Mm,
guy has, and he hits it. Oh, it's woe is me. Like, I feel like that's just a very common like live player thing.
sure.
So that would kind of be my guess, just because also like I am just not convinced he's folding an ace if he's this kind of player. And I just have seen this so much where people are like, "Oh, dealer, why'd you do this to me? You deal me jacks, and then the flop comes an ace."
Yeah, no,
You
you're
know?
probably right. Like, I think I don't know why I did or I guess I do know why I did what I did, but ultimately I think it was bad and, not something I would normally do, but I just for some reason did it this time. It worked out for me, but not a good strategy, I would say.
No, but it's quite a read. And I mean, if you're like quite convinced, I mean, yeah, I just think we can call it there. But as is, I mean, you won the hand. And the other thing is, it's kind of a mental game thing where I get it, right? If you're playing a super boring game, like a super boring table, and you're like, well, I just like this is, I have a top pair, like I haven't made a good hand, I have an opportunity to actually win some money and play a fun hand, like I'm gonna do it. You
Yeah,
know, I
sure.
I do get that because it's like, wow, it sounds like you were having just kind of like a miserable time. Not like hanging out with your friends, but like,
Yeah, I mean, I
you
was
know,
having fun, but I was pretty amazed by the game, the quality of
right.
the game. So, all right, well, we should move along here from our bad play and talk about more our bad thinking. So,
Well, that's a good point. You can't have bad play without starting to, have bad fundamentals. So let's move into this new segment. It's called Fumbling Fundamentals. In this segment, we will bring you some of the theory of poker explained poorly, as the rest of our show is. Um, we're going to try and do kind of a quick overview of some of our discussions and some of our thoughts on a couple really interesting pieces of poker theory. And why don't we start with something that is becoming increasingly more common in a lot of games, really across the country, bomb pots.
yeah, bomb pots are great. They're great for a number of reasons. One, they drive action at the table. We've talked about this many times before on the podcast, but anything you can do to get players all loosey goosey is a great way to make more money at that game. So that's, I think, my first thought when it comes to bomb pots is just like as an action driver. But honestly, they can also be a great way to make money in the bomb pot.
Yeah, and I would have to guess, that your table that you were at did not play a whole lot of bomb pots.
No, there were no bomb pots at my table.
Well, exactly. Right. And I agree. I mean, I think, a key part of bomb pots is, you are playing a hand where you are in it with like eight other people. You are against eight other ranges. You have to really, as you're thinking about your hand in a bomb pot, you really have to think that your hand is very, very strong. And let's preface this just in case anyone doesn't know what a bomb pot is, or people don't necessarily play them everywhere. A bomb pot is when it's either Hold'em or it's pot limit Omaha. Everybody gets their hand as usual, but rather than put in blinds, everybody puts in an ante. Basically, they put in some amount of money. In a 2-2 game, it might be like $10. In a 2-5 game, it might be $25, and you go straight to a flop with all players in the hand. A lot of the time, and I think the better way to do it is with two boards, so it's a split pot game. But sometimes people do single board Omaha or Hold'em bomb pots as well.
Yeah, and just to be clear, in a split pot game, for those who have not played a split pot game, the pot is cut at the end of the hand, will be divided in half, and the winner of each board will get half the pot. Of course, if you have both boards covered, you win both boards, you scoop the whole pot, but a lot of times that doesn't happen. And the reason it's so good to have split pots for bomb pots is because of what Josh is sort of getting at here is there can be some really insanely strong hands in a bomb pot.
Right, like it is not out of the ordinary, for example, for someone to literally have like flop top set on both boards. Like
Sure.
just because you are against so many strong ranges, you really can't rule anything out. And especially also when you get into like Omaha bomb pots where you have 4 cards and you can play different cards on each board. You could have sets and flushes on like different boards and things just go absolutely crazy in terms of hand strength.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the critical thing in a bomb pot is really not to overvalue your hand. And that means from a betting and a calling standpoint. I mean, typically in Hold'em, folding a pair on the flop is like almost never correct. I mean, it's not literally never correct, but it's something that you should do very seldom, especially in a heads up match, in a heads up hand. But in a bomb pot, you should be folding second pair or worse aggressively, and even some
Yeah.
weak top pairs.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And this actually brings me to another point that I was going to talk about specifically on a 2-board bomb pot. It is way better to be betting when you have a hand that is nutted on one board and nothing on the other than to bet a hand that's middling on both boards.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a split pot game, you can often kind of go like literally make a value bluff where you basically get people to like fold a hand that you would otherwise be chopping with. It's like a weird thing, right? Where you act even though you have like a board locked up, right? Let's say you have like 7-6, and one board is 8-4-5, so you've got the nuts, and one board is like Ace King Queen, so you've got nothing. If you just like go play super aggressively, you can get people off you know, you can get people off like King Queen a lot of the time because some people do play like so tight. And then like you are just like free rolling basically, and you just if you have a board one, there's a lot of incentive to really play aggressively, to avoid losing the other board and splitting the pot.
Yeah, definitely. Um, I think that it's really the other thing too. Like, I wouldn't recommend doing a bomb pot right when you sit down at a table because it's one of those things where you really want to understand player tendencies. I mean, obviously, if they want to do a bomb pot, you do a bomb pot. But I wouldn't if you're going to be the one recommending the bomb pot. Maybe recommend it after you've been there a little while and you kind of understand how folks are playing. Because really understanding whether someone is a calling station or a nit or an OMC or an aggressive type of player, like really understanding those tendencies, like those things get absolutely magnified in a bomb pot. I mean, I would say, for example, if you know somebody is sort of a station and will call with anything, um, you can make so much money off that player in a bomb pot. Like you should, because when you make a big hand, they are, and which you can do, you can make some really big hands in a bomb pot. That is a player who you can really often get stacks in against. I mean, I've definitely seen that happen. I don't know about you. I mean, I've just seen like there are players who will really overcall in bomb pots.
Yeah, like I've definitely seen people call, second pair on one board and a weak flush draw on the other, right? Which is just not gonna do it against someone who's betting into 8 other players.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is the sort of thing to understand about the bomb pot is like almost no one is ever balanced. Like people do not bluff. Like if you think people under bluff in normal games, like people under bluff in bomb pots hugely. So if there's some serious action in front of you and you don't have a really nutted type hand, you can just let it go. I mean, you should. But man, when you have the nuts, like you should not be afraid to just put money in.
Yeah, and there's kind of a lot of interesting thoughts on this on these type of hands. For example, I think I've read a couple schools of thought that basically say, when you're early position, just because of how strong ranges are and how many people there are left to act, and you have a really strong hand, it's okay to literally like never bet from early position and plan on check raising you're super strong and just trying to pile the money in, when you actually got one of those nutted hands, rather than kind of betting and letting everyone else follow along for that price.
Yeah, that's a really good point, too. I mean, just a way to navigate these boards. Yeah, I mean, I think position is really, position's always important in poker, but in bomb pots, it does make a big difference. You know, being on the button in a bomb pot, I mean, you really have so much, you have so much of an advantage, because if their crazy action occurs in front of you, I mean, you really don't have to stick around with anything. I mean, you can just know, you can gauge really how strong your hand is a lot of time, just if it checks to you. uh you can decide, like, hey, am I willing to face a check raise with this hand or not? And then, a lot of times you can just take your strong hands as a check, or you can, start to induce people to pile money in. Versus, from early position, you are really a lot, like Josh was saying, you're a lot more dependent on what everybody else does in the hand. It's not usually wise to open the action, especially in a PLO bomb pot. I think in a Hold'em bomb pot, you can. I think you can lead out a little bit more. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think in Hold'em, there's obviously just less combinations of hands. There are more opportunities for you to sort of lead out. And again, even if you do happen to lead out with a hand that you think is pretty strong, but might not necessarily be the top of your range, you could still fold to like crazy action. To your point, Mike, about how people kind of have those tendencies like under bluffing kind of magnified in bomb pots. I think a lot of these tendencies wind up being magnified in bomb pots, right? I mean, kind of we talk a lot, and we've talked a lot on the podcast about how people often view themselves as quote priced in,
Uh-huh.
when a lot of people call in front of them and they're like, well, it's only 10 more bucks and there's 5 other people I should just call. It's even worse in bomb pots, right? If a guy bets it at 8 people and like 6 people call, like you just should like, never there's what hands should you really be calling with?
Right. Exactly. Like, you can think about it as like, you probably are never priced in to a multi-person hand in a bomb pot. You're basically like, should be raising or folding at that point.
Right.
Uh,
Exactly.
yeah.
Right. So
So
just a couple of thoughts on, how to exploit and avoid being exploited yourself.
absolutely, and you should play bomb pots. I mean, you should encourage your local table to your tables to do them. Get them going at your local casino if they're not going, because they're a lot of fun and they really can be profitable if you know how to navigate them. There is one thing I will recommend, though, about this, which is, do not play, if you can help it. Do not play single board pot limit Omaha bomb pots. Would you agree with this, Josh?
Yeah, can you explain a little more for people who maybe haven't played as much Omaha or Omaha
Yeah,
bomb pots as we have?
absolutely. In a pot limit Omaha bomb pot, there are in a single board pot limit Omaha bomb pot, there are so many combinations of hands out there. Like, well, think about it like from the double board example, right? In a double board game, there's so many combinations of hands out there. Like, somebody's making the nuts. You know, that's still true in a single board pot limit Omaha bomb pot. Somebody's making the nuts. The only problem is there's no split pot there to act as sort of a security web for you to get it in with, like, a second best hand on one board but still win the other. That's not happening. There's one board and somebody has the nuts on that board. And if it's not you, you should fold. You should fold so many hands in a single board pot limit Omaha bomb pot. You should basically never fold hands, or sorry, never put a bunch of money in with hands that aren't the nuts. I think that it sounds exaggerating, but I really think it's true.
And even worse, right? There are times when you can have the nuts in pot limit Omaha specifically because of how the game works. And there are just so many cards out there that it is very easy to have the nuts and be crushed.
Yeah.
Like, for example, if in my example, right, let's say it's 8-4-5 on the flop and you have 7-6 and you flop a straight. Well, you might be up against 7-6 with a set or 7-6 with a flush draw and just be like absolutely dominated. Like, this is just why single board bomb pots are just so rough, because there's so many cards in people's hands that like interact so much with the board that there's just no opportunity to really like, there's not as much play as maybe we would like.
Yeah, 100%. So definitely bomb pots are great. Hold'em, double board PLO are the common ones. You can also do goofy stuff if you want. Play like crazy pineapple bomb pot. Josh and I did that at one drunk 2 a.m. in southern New Hampshire. That was a good time. But single board PLO, not the best.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, I think that's a good all good points, or all points at least. And if you guys have other advice on how to play bomb pots, our listeners, please leave a comment. Let us know how you'd like to do it, and what your tips are for making money there. Should we move on to the next piece of our fumbling fundamentals?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the next topic we wanted to discuss here is about some sort of, it's something we've mentioned on the podcast before. It's a little bit of an interesting trick, exploitative trick at low stakes games, 1-2, 1-3, 2-5, that you probably can't really apply in higher stakes games, which is about getting value with marginal made hands. Not the strongest type of hands, where a hand that you might want to go for two streets with. So, an example of a top, sort of like a top pair medium kicker, like a king queen, maybe on or a king jack on king, king 9-10 or something like that. Yeah, you've got a reasonable hand, but a lot of times, if you were to go for three streets of value with this hand, for example, you would lose. You are not going to get three streets of value with this hand uh, almost ever. And a lot of times the theory goes with those hands, you can see bet the flop, for example, and you can get called. But then a lot of times if you're in position, you're going to want to check back the turn. And then possibly go for a second street of value on the river, depending on what your opponent does. And I would say that that's true in general against competent opponents. But when you're playing against less competent opponents, what I've found has been a big exploit in my games that's won me money is you take your two street value hands, and instead of going for the flop and river, you try to get value on the flop and turn. And the reason for this is because players will call you with so many bad draws that they will not on the turn, which they will not call you with on the river. And at these stakes, people almost never check raise their draws as a bluff. So you're basically just getting money from these trash gut shots, or even open-ended straight draws or flush draws that simply are just hanging on. They don't have the odds to call, but they're calling anyway. And you're going to get that money from them. And then when they miss the river, or even if they don't miss the river is just going to go check anyway. So it's sort of because they're so unlikely to raise you, it's sort of like a free way to get that extra value.
Yeah.
Does that pretty much sum it up?
Yeah, well, I think it's definitely, there's a lot of facets here where, just as Mike said, just because a lot of it is just because people aren't bluffing enough, where, ordinarily you might think, if I check back the turn with my, top pair weak kicker, and someone, bets river, I can call, and if they check, I can go for some thin value. But really, there's just as he said, there's just so many hands, pair plus gut shot, pair plus straight draw, just bad flush draws that are gonna pay you off on the turn because people love calling with draws. And then they're gonna, then they're just gonna give up the river and you won't be able to get paid off. Another aspect I would say is that there are also a lot of scare cards that definitely have more impact in these low stakes games. Where in your example, right, if we have King Jack or King Queen on King 10-9, and the turn is a brick and it went check, and the river is an ace. Like, people are just going to wind up like folding kings or like a hand that we otherwise could have gotten value from because like this scare card comes off that they kind of perceive as being more impactful to our range than maybe it actually is.
Right. Yeah,
That's the other
absolutely. That's
part.
a
Yeah.
really good point. Because, I mean, yeah, players really aren't thinking it. They're not going to think like, oh, well, I have to defend with my kings here, with my, king 8 or whatever. I have to defend with my king 8 here as played because that's how I balance my range. Like, no, that's not what's going on here. They have a king, they see an ace, you bet pre-flop and c-bet, they're scared, they fold on the river. And you don't want that. You want to get value from those king 8 type hands, and they're going to call you on the turn. They're going to say, "Oh, I'll call one time," or things like that. And you really you want to take advantage of that. I mean, when you have this player type that is not liable to check raise you as a bluff, you can really get away with this stuff. I mean, as you go up in stakes, where there are players who are playing their draws this way as a check raise bluff, and you have a marginal made hand, the worst thing that can happen is you go for value on the turn and then you get blown off your hand by a check raise. I mean, you probably shouldn't be calling a lot of check raises with king jack on king 10-9. I mean, maybe you do because you're actually blocking the nut straight, but in general, there are lots of other. I mean, it depends. It's going to depend on the suit distribution and all this other stuff. But bottom line, there are a lot of hands that you can absolutely get blown off by a check raise on the turn, which you just won't. You just won't be at these low stakes games, which it's sort of remarkable, but it's true.
Yeah, and I mean, it's kind of it's very related to sort of a well-known live low stakes exploit where people just aren't bluffing enough, and it's always better. Not always, it's often better to go for thin value rather than hope that someone bluffs into you. It's kind of the similar situation where if people have missed draws, you might think the theory might say, or someone might think in a more aggressive game, let's switch this scenario to being out of position, where you might think, oh, if turn goes check, check, and then I check river with my weak pair, they're going to bluff with a misdraw. But, like, they aren't. Like, people at live low stakes just aren't going to be bluffing their misdraws enough. You would rather just bet turn and then have the river go check, check, have them say, I missed, and shake their head dejectedly.
Exactly. That is like it's like a scene from a movie that will play out over and over again. And they'll also say something like, "Why am I always chasing?"
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. That's what they say in Florida. Do you hear that one much in Boston?
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes they like show their cards to the dealer, and they're like, "Oh, you couldn't have put a heart out there one time."
Exactly. I mean, it's like they never think to raise with their draws, and that's good for us. If we're out there trying to exploit these players and make money from them, it's like that's a tendency we should absolutely be observing. I mean, I will say, to sort of, finish this out, it is possible to take these things, like take these ideas of like, oh, people at low stakes don't bluff or whatever, like to the extreme, and sort of you open yourself up to being exploited quite a bit. I think if you are really just like I have played against a lot of players who say, oh, at low stakes no one ever bluffs, so I just fold whenever anyone bets big. But I don't think that is necessarily correct. I think that there are absolutely lots of money to be made from picking off spazzes in particular.
Yeah.
Like, so I wouldn't agree that players at these levels never bluff, but I will say that it's they definitely bluff too little, and it's something you can take advantage of.
Well, I think to your last point, it's something that we've talked about and even gone over hands on the podcast, right? Where we kind of recognize, and it's important to recognize that, players who don't understand theory can often still get kind of an understanding of theory or have, just they don't think about it the same way. They can perceive weakness or capped ranges kind of in their own way and think, as we've said, I think we've gone over hands where people basically start firing on the turn in position, if you check the flop and the turn. And it's important to not just think, oh, he's betting big here, I fold, right? My top pair or something that I've slow played or that I've run into, and instead think, well, this is actually a different type of tendency where players do bluff in these sort of situations where they perceive weakness and they think they can kind of blow you off. It's not like
Yeah.
it's not like all these players are stupid. Like that's not at all what we're implying. It's just sort of their they might understand the game a little bit differently than we do, and they are still certainly taking bluffs, making spazzes, and trying and attacking when they perceive weakness.
Yeah, well said. Well said. They're not stupid. We are.
Exactly.
So, and you are too, because you've just wasted another hour listening to us prattle on about our bad play. So thanks for doing that with us, though. We really do appreciate it. And we do hope that you will like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. It really, like we said before, makes us feel good when people do that. It gives you a special place in our heart. It makes you more likely to be thought of fondly in this life and the next.
And as they say, when the numbers go up, it means you're having more fun. So that's just what we're looking for.
All right. Well, it's been a pleasure as always, my friend.
Yeah, same to you. And thanks everyone for tuning in. Let us know how you felt about the segment. And if you'd like to hear more Fumbling Fundamentals in the future, we would be happy to bring you some more.
All righty. Bye, everybody.